I'm not going to sweat it.
We're just recording.
Yeah.
Some of them will be great recordings to have. Some of them will be like, oh, okay.
But at least you've got a record.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got something. And are these being live streamed? Is there a chance that someone could be watching this?
No.
Okay.
Because
No, we
it's-
talked about that, but
It's
I
a
think we
Google
decided
Meet, but only Ben
it
is
was
in it.
more, right? So, yeah, I mean, we can really personalize this. So just so that you know, Taylor is very familiar with Domain of One Zone. He helps me support it, especially on the more technical ends. He's really great with this kind of stuff. I know I remember from your DigPins application or your full spectrum learning application that you have background in education.
Yeah.
And that you have background in teaching.
Yep.
But yeah, maybe you could just tell me a little bit more about your background and if you have any past history with Domain of One Zone or with managing a domain. Because I don't want to bore you if you've already, know about this stuff or heard about this stuff.
Well, have I heard of it? Sure.
Okay.
Did I ever get into it enough to be able to do it independently or without bothering tech help a lot? No. Yeah, I love all this stuff, but I dabbled in it, and half the time the technology we had available wasn't strong enough. It was just easier not to use it and just to insert it as was necessary. But in terms of being able to rely on it, no, so I never got very good at it. So
Yeah.
pretend that I know nothing, and I'll be happy.
Goodness. And I do think that the technology's come a long way. Really, Domain of One Zone is, it's not really a new concept in terms of the web, but it is a new concept in terms of doing it within education. So I have such a close affiliation to it because part of I'm a non-traditional student. So I'm a first generation high school graduate, first in family college graduate. And I started my college career by going back to community college and just taking classes that I thought were interesting, which eventually turned into an associate's degree in liberal arts, but what are you gonna do with that, right? So I went back and I got a 2-year certificate to the same community college, a 2-year certificate in web design and development, which is a little more practical, right? But in that program, they actually didn't have server space for us. They would not give us public server space. One, because I think they thought, I ended up getting a job with the academic technology group near the end of that program that I was in, and that's how I got involved with academic technology. But so they said that they couldn't support it technically. I think they could have supported it technically. I think really they were afraid. They were afraid to give students a place where they could publicly have a voice, because I mean they could put anything up there. We can't control it, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that as times have changed and as we have gone forward, it's become really obvious that it's almost more prudent to do that with students, where we can talk with them about what we should be putting online in a public way, than saying we're not going to give them any resources when they can go out and find those resources anywhere. They could do that on their own, right? Without any guidance and without any, educational perspective on that. So what was kind of feared 15, 20 years ago, because, oh my God, what if I think I've become a little bit more clear that, well, they always could anyway. Why don't we give them the tools and show them how to do it the right way? So doing it from a technical perspective or from an institutional perspective brings some of its own challenges. So Domain of One Zone, sometimes we abbreviate this as D, lowercase o, uppercase OO. It's a global educational initiative that empowers students, staff, faculty, and institutions of higher education to take responsibility for a little piece of the internet that they can call their own. It allows for academic and professional self-expression. So really all we're talking about is giving students, staff, and faculty a little bit of server space. that they can install different applications on. If they know how to write a little bit of HTML, they could put that up there. Most of the programs that we work with are just open source programs that they can install. It's kind of like installing an app on your phone, right? So different apps have different functionality. And I can, show you some of that. But basically this entails registering a domain name of some kind. So in our cases, we're not providing students or staff or faculty with a top level domain name, which would be like a .com or a .info or a .org, that kind of thing. Rather, we're giving them a subdomain of Knight.domains. So I've got Autumn.Knight.domains. I think you've got Taylor.Knight.domains, right? But you have to kind of choose that namespace, and then you get 1 gigabyte of space, which isn't a ton, but it's not a small amount in terms of public server space. It would be minuscule if it were on like a jump drive or something like that. But as far as public server space goes, it's not a ton, but it's not a small amount either. And you can install WordPress on that, or a wiki site if you wanted to work with content in that way. But again, if you're a little more technical and you want to write HTML or CSS and just host like files there, you can do that too.
Okay.
So it is all at once like a simple idea, but it's also kind of a complex idea. So what does that look like? What does it all mean? We talked about this being like, that you want to have your naming. In terms of having server space, this is kind of big picture, right? If you were just doing this on your own, you could run your own server, but that's a whole nother level of technical expertise that you'd have to have. So what a lot of people do instead is that they buy some server space from a hosting company. The hosting company we use is called Reclaim Hosting, and they specifically work with educational institutions to provide this particular service. And it mirrors anything that you would find if you were to go out and buy server space from, say, like a GoDaddy or a Bluehost or something like that. So one of the things that I really love about this particular technology is that can't say 100% for sure, because there are some other interfaces that you might potentially run out there, but by and large, like if students have this experience here, the thing that they're learning is the exact same kind of technology that they're going to run into if they go out and buy server space with a Bluehost or a GoDaddy or something like that. So they're kind of learning on a real world technology. In contrast to if I put them in, say, Moodle, right? And I run a Moodle class with them. Yes, they're gaining some technical expertise about the way that Moodle works that they might use in other classes. But once they graduate, unless they're going into education, they're probably never going to use Moodle again, right? So I really love the fact that they're learning something that is real world that they could potentially use even after graduation. So this is an interesting little quote from Audrey Waters. This idea of domain of one's own comes from the first institution that really kind of did this under this moniker with this philosophy is the University of Mary Washington. And it really was the idea of let's give students ownership over a piece of the web, right? And it's going to be curricular, but also co-curricular in nature. Something that they can, something they can really call their own. And they based it in Virginia Woolf. So University of Mary Washington was a historically women's college, right? And Virginia Woolf has this book called A Room of One's Own, where she argues that a woman of her time, to be able to write fiction, needed to have money so that she could support herself in a room of her own, where she could close the door and think, right, and be able to write on her own. So they've tied it to that, and Audrey Waters speaks about it in this little paragraph that I kind of pulled out here. So she says, intellectual productivity on the web looks a bit different, no doubt, than it did at Woolf's writing desk, but there remains this notion, deeply embedded in domain of one's own, that it is important to have one's own space in order to develop one's ideas and one's craft. It is important that learners have control over their work, their content, and their data. So one of the other things that I love about this project is that it's building digital literacies inside the student that I hope anyway will sort of transfer out into things that they'll have even more ownership over. Ownership is a complex philosophical notion, right? Their ownership always comes with some form of responsibility. We can't even own property without paying some kind of tax or being part of some type of larger system, right? So of course the ownership that they have inside of our context here is a little bit different than their ownership if they were to just go out on the web. But even in that case, they're going to be governed by certain laws and certain responsibilities. So it I think creates a nice microcosm for them to work in that mirrors, you know, what they're going to see when they graduate. Make sense? Mm-hmm. All right.
That's why I'm here.
So I guess this slide here is a little bit redundant. This is like the ownership piece of it. But I guess it does touch a little bit on, so, you know, you could just go out and use Facebook or Blogger or WordPress.com even. WordPress.com really throws people for a loop because that's one of the applications that you can install. And it's probably our most common application that we've installed is WordPress.com or WordPress, right? But what is the difference between WordPress.com and WordPress? So owning your own server and installing WordPress on that server is different than going to WordPress.com and signing up for a service that somebody else is going to manage. It's sort of a layer above. A lot of those other systems, especially like your Squarespaces and your Wix and those kind of, they create a beautiful product. And students may at some point, if they, you know, are running their own business or something like that, they may decide that they need that ease of use and they need to go there eventually. But starting with a foundation where they struggle with some of the more technical concepts, I think enables them to at least ask better questions if they were to go to a more service-oriented kind of platform, or if they were to hire somebody to just take care of it for them. There's a lot of things out there that can be quite predatory in terms of, and it might not even be predatory in, you know, like the person selling the product might even realize they're being predatory. They're selling a certain product, right? They're wanting to get the most that they can out of it. So of course they're going to try to sell like the highest level, but they're not really going to work with that particular customer and say, you know, you just need a simple website. You don't really need all of that, right? So this just enables students to sort of figure out what it is exactly that they need, ask the questions that will best align with their particular projects. And hopefully allow them to be better digital stewards on the web as a whole. Right, the internet and the web as a whole is an ecosystem in and of itself. It's made up of a lot of different players. Some of them are more benevolent, some of them are more predatory, and being able to sort of understand and navigate that complex environment only comes through understanding that environment and working in it on a regular basis. But how do we teach with it, right? What happens when we start talking about this complex environment in terms of pedagogy? So here at St. Norbert, we've got this idea of full spectrum pedagogy, which is a framework that's designed to help faculty situate their current practice, conceptualize a range of possibilities, and shift the focus toward how they might use technology to enhance student engagement and learning. Basically, full spectrum pedagogy is just this idea that we've got like fully online learning and we've got fully face-to-face learning, but that those things don't need to be in contrast to one another, right? There's a spectrum between those things, because even if I have a fully online class, maybe I give homework online, or maybe we have a snow day and I make a video rather than having everybody come in, right? And then if I have a fully online class, even though it might be a fully online class, I might assign something to the students that would be a physical experience, and that each student who's taking that online class has a physical experience somewhere, right? One of my favorite examples of this I designed, it was at a different institution, but I helped to design a nursing class that was about alternative therapies. So they talked about massage, they talked about meditation, they talked about aromatherapy, those kind of things. And so one of their, like their homework, they would get the content online, it's completely online class, but they would have these experiences. They'd go out and get a little aromatherapy kit, and they would practice with each one of the different scents, and then they would write a blog post about that experience. One of their homework assignments was to go out and hug a tree. Like, we can still have these physical experiences inside of an online class. Just because a class is online doesn't mean that we're just sitting there staring at a screen all day. So really kind of recognizing that full spectrum of different experiences that we have in online environments, and utilizing technology where it's best kind of fit. So the idea of domains in particular is something that's curricular and co-curricular, and I think that if we're thinking about this in terms of how do we teach with it, we have to always remember that. We always have to be based in that. So this is particularly important because each student only gets one subdomain name. And so they need to sort of think about what they want that name to be. And if they were to claim a name like English 101.night.domains, that wouldn't be very good, because for one thing, that would eat up English 101.night.domains for the entire institution. But that student hopefully will run into other situations where maybe they would want to do a domain for another class, or do a domain for an extra, after school kind of club or something like that too. So they can continue to build off of a more generic name, which could be their legal name, but we also always like to say that the legal name isn't always the best way to go either for every single person. Some people, like we were talking about, right?
Right, yeah.
You want to do something a little bit different, either a different misspelling or a maybe just a different name, maybe a character that you've created, whatever the case might be. So I have autumn.night.domains. I could totally have english101.autumn.night.domains, right? And that allows me to a much broader way to kind of contextualize that stuff. And then Taylor, I think if we had somebody who was really kind of in a pickle, we could change the name, but that's not something we normally do on practice.
Yeah, it's not available to them, they'd have to ask for that to be done.
And it would have to be like kind of,
I think we'd have to essentially make them a new one and move the stuff over there.
right.
So it's not something that we advertise, oh, you can change it anytime. It's really done to me. But it can be done. If it was necessary.
Yeah, like if somebody,
It's the same thing like with email addresses at the college. Can you change your email address that you have at the college? Yes. Is it something you do flippantly? No.
Right. I remember
You
every
do it when
time
your name changes.
Moodle changed, that the poor guy who was in charge of it would email us and say, get rid of anything you don't want, because I have to migrate all of it. Like, piece by
Oh,
piece.
wow.
Yeah.
where was that at?
Green Bay Schools.
Oh,
Poor man.
Yeah.
Because I was there for, I don't know, almost
In-
20 years,
In
and
K-12, like the
Yeah.
district.
and he had
He's
to
cool there.
change it 3 or 4 times. And for the whole district, there was one guy in charge of it.
Yeah.
It got less and less and less and less every year. That was what they started out with, and by now, the only people there are legacy people. You've been teaching on Moodle your whole career, so you can continue.
It's a pretty big district. I mean,
Yeah.
um,
What do they use?
But they're using mostly Google. When I left, I don't know what they're doing now.
Probably, that's what a lot of schools, a lot of schools that didn't even have an LMS, smaller schools,
Mhm.
are using Classroom because you don't really need anyone to be in charge of it, really.
Right.
Teachers can use it.
Yeah, I was really concerned about the privacy of that, though.
Yeah.
I just, Google swears up and down that they're taking care of you, but they're taking care of you.
No, I completely agree. Google's an advertising company, and I have real concerns about just handing them tons of student data.
Yeah, that was because they're minors and they don't have a
Yeah.
choice. The teacher
Yeah.
assigns them, you must do this. And, I mean, they're kids, they put all kinds of personal stuff up there.
And we don't have anybody who's really in charge of it. Like it's the double-edged sword, right? It's like really nice because you don't have anybody in charge of it, but
I mean,
you don't have anybody in charge of it.
you do, it's easier to administer basically, but yeah, no, that's totally a very valid concern.
So that's one of the nice things about Moodle. So getting back to domains a little bit, one of the applications that you could install on your domain space is Moodle, right? Moodle's an open source application, and it's actually part of our Installatron. One-click kind of installers that you could install. I wouldn't recommend it. Like if you're a teacher, I wouldn't recommend teaching with Moodle in that way. We did have, wasn't it? I think it was Anders who was tinkering with Moodle itself, because Moodle's open source. You can get into the source and you can actually tinker with it. So he was writing
Someone
stuff.
like him would have been perfect. He was writing plugins for Moodle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So having his own Moodle instance where he was the administrator of that particular system, there's no student data in it. It's just straight out of the box Moodle instance that he can tinker with. That's a great instance to be able to do that. People like Taylor and I do that on occasion, even though we have a hosted Moodle system and our hosting company does a great job of supporting us. And Taylor does a great job of administering that. Sometimes it's nice to just kind of throw up my own Moodle system, and just so that way I can kind of poke around and make some mistakes and break it, right?
Think about like if you're someone who's working on their own car, but you have the luxury of having a practice car.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't want to break the Moodle that everyone here uses.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, you get a sandbox that's really a sandbox. It's not
Exactly.
connected in any way.
Yeah, I've got the identical same make and model car, but it's kind of like a junker that I can sort of have practice on, right? Like that's kind of cool.
But that can be really powerful for students too. I mean,
Yeah.
there are students who are out there who want to maybe build something, or like even from like a student who wants to start a business and wants to have a website, and maybe they want to play around with the website, or computer science students who are coding and programming something from scratch. There's a lot of really cool use cases.
So there's a lot of neat stuff that you can do with it. There's a couple of different models that we have. So the most simple kind of basic thing that you could do with it as a teacher sort of takes away the ownership piece from the student. It doesn't, well, I shouldn't say it takes away, it doesn't give the ownership piece to the student, and it doesn't build that higher level of digital literacy that I was talking about. But if it's a lower level class, if we're talking about, first year students, that might be a great place to begin, especially if you don't have a larger picture of, ultimately what you're going to do with this thing, with students. So the instructor in this model, the instructor claims a domain for themselves, and they put up some type of, either a content management system of some type, or potentially they could do some FTP credentials or something like that maybe. And then they give the students accounts on that particular. And so I've got two examples of this. One is a WordPress example. So this is a social geography class where we've got a WordPress install, and each one of the students, which I think we've got to drill into, so this is a post by Maddie, and in this particular case, the professor is only using students' first names, which is a lot of times a best practice, because students are students, right? They're not experts yet, and so
you don't want it to follow you for the rest of your life.
Not
exactly.
necessarily. You want to let them make that choice.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this case, she's only using first names. We have to drill into the actual post to even be able to see that, right? If I'm out here at the main timeline, I don't think, no, even at the bottom, do the names come up. So I have to go into the actual post itself. But yeah, you know, they're participating in class discussions. This is a completely face-to-face class. This is not an online class, completely face-to-face. They're having discussions in class. They're doing readings. They're looking at different things over, like homework, right? And then they blog, right? They're blogging about these different things that they're reading about and talking about, thinking about. They're going out on the web and finding videos and having this as a place to sort of break through with their thinking. They don't, it looks like, have a requirement of commenting in this class, but that's another way to do it, is to make it more of a conversation. I think because it's a fully face-to-face class, most of the conversation's happening in class, and this is more of a reflection afterwards. But using WordPress blogs, you do have the ability to comment, so having commenting be another layer that you can use for teaching is one way that you can look at that. So in this particular case, again, the students don't have their own domains, but the teacher has a domain. The teacher has installed WordPress, and the teacher has given accounts to each one of the students. And this is the same model we're going to use in DigPins too, where I have the DigPins, snc.digpins.org. I've got a WordPress install on that, and I'm going to give each one of the participants an author account on that WordPress install, so that way they can contribute to the blog. This does not build domain literacy in students, but it does build a low level of digital literacy in terms of what is WordPress, what does it mean to work in the public, what does it mean to have an author account, what kind of name do I want to use, that kind of thing, right? Here's another example. So that's WordPress. I really love this example so much. So this is Adam Brandt in biology. He's a biologist, and he's going to be taking students to South Africa. Before they go, they're studying a bunch of different aspects. And this is not MediaWiki. This is PBWiki. Is that right? I'm looking at Taylor. I forget the name of it. DocuWiki. That's what it is. So, but it's very similar to the Wikipedia content management system, right? It looks like Wikipedia, it kind of feels like Wikipedia. And he has the students basically creating Wikipedia or creating encyclopedia articles around different things. So if they go into diseases, they've got a couple of different articles in here. I don't even know any of this stuff, right? This is Rinderpest, which apparently was an epidemic disease. I think I read through this. I think they have cured it. But this is not, you know, trivial stuff. Like the students actually go in and collaborate on an article in a draft mode.
Actual alt text and captions and all that.
Yeah, it's really neat, right? And they've got references down here at the bottom that they're using to you know, to justify their work, and they build all of this stuff out in a draft mode before it goes public, and then he kind of helps them to make it more public as it goes along. And it's still a work in progress. You can see they've still got, you know, kind of these question marks here that they're still kind of filling in, but it's just a really interesting way to work with students. You know, this isn't a blog, this is a wiki project, but just another way of sort of working with students. Excuse me.
Full spectrum site should be wiki.
Oh.
The grid site should be like this grid.
Yeah.
You know, the whole grid.
Oh.
And you see like the videos and stuff that we've all put together. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
might be easier to manage that.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Like this necessarily.
Right.
Anyway,
Interesting.
just a thought.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, he's got a lot of different things in here. So that's kind of one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is where each student has their own domain. Each student chooses their domain name. They get that server space of their own, right? And they choose if they're going to do a wiki or if they're going to do a blog, depending on what the project is. Is it going to be a portfolio site? This is me world, right? Here are my qualifications and my credentials, and I'm going to use this after graduation to potentially get a job. Is it just for class? Am I going to just, you know, put up a final project, or am I going to maybe blog about my experience in a club or just as a student, right? And we do have most of our stuff is at night.domains, and anybody can go here, student, staff, faculty, and sign up for a domain. So this is where you go to sign up, but this is also what you see. You know, I'll go ahead and just log in with my own account. So when I log in, this is cPanel, right? This is where I go to sort of manage my domain. The applications are all listed here, and there are a ton of applications that I could install. Again, this is sort of like installing an app on your phone, but this is where I go to find, well, there's DocuWiki that we were just looking at, right? That's the tool that Adam used to build that. Here's WordPress, which is the other one we looked at. All of these are open source tools that people can get really from anywhere, and you could install on any server. But what's nice about this Installatron is that it's kind of like a one-click type of installer. So I can just go in there and create a subdomain off on the other page, and then just choose where I want to install this, and just kind of say install, like I would for a phone, or like I would on my computer, right? And it just kind of, little progress bar, it just sort of installs. But it's a public website, or it's a public wiki, or it's an e-commerce tool, or whatever the case might be, whatever the application is that I've installed, rather than like just something that's on my phone. So you can see there's a ton of different stuff in here. There's Moodle. We talked about Moodle too, right? Ton of different stuff in here. We are by no means experts on all of these different applications, so we encourage folks to dive in and sort of play around a little bit. We do have sort of a soft policy, soft rule, I guess, that, I mean, it's soft in the case that it's not officially, I think, written down anywhere, but it's of a general understanding that we wouldn't want anybody like collecting credit card information, and if we found that, we would put the kibosh on that real quick, right?
It's not a soft policy, it's in our network usage policy.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But we do have the tools there, so that way people can play around with that and learn how to do that on their own if they want it. To do that on some space that they built for themselves. So we leave it there so that way they can tinker with it and play with it. But if we ever found it in actual production, we would contact that person and be like, you can't do that on our site. So that gets into that, again, that idea of ownership, right? And that the ownership that you have through this is not the same that you would have if you were truly like paying for your own service. The company that we use, Reclaim Hosting, actually will sell an individual server space as well. It starts off at $30 a year. It's not a lot of money. So if people wanted to do that on their own, they could totally do that really easily.
We do also have departments and student groups that are starting to use the service. So examples, we have the art. Art has a domain on our night domain system where they advertise the fact that, so art requires students to make domains for their portfolios. So they have a site about the portfolios, basically. We have had student groups who have looked into potentially building a site for their own group and recruitment and whatever, things like that.
And we have examples of all that stuff up here on our examples page. And so this page just kind of shows people's different sites. So the first thing that you get into is not the site itself, but a page about the site. So it kind of tells you about that particular person. There's screenshots of the site. At the top of every one, you can visit the actual site if you want to. But this page gives you some technical details about the site, what application they're using. Almost everybody's using WordPress, but I'm hoping that, especially once Adam gets his wiki site a little more fleshed out, that we can start putting some other applications up there. What theme they're using. So inside WordPress, you change like kind of the look and the feel of your site by using what are called themes. So this is a great way if people are shopping for themes and they can see what somebody else has used. This kind of tells you what's going on. And then plugins in WordPress add functionality to the site, different kinds of functionality. It could be a contact form or displaying PDFs in a certain way or that kind of thing. So it tells you any kind of plugins that they're using. And then I've asked everybody to, who's featured here, to give me a little statement about what they're doing with their domain and why that's important to them. So at Night.Domains, under examples, you could find you know, a bunch of these. And then I've also categorized them as different types of site. So you can, this just kind of brings them together. So yeah, the only department site we have right now is the art department. This is the one that Taylor was talking about. But you can see they've got a whole page on domains for art majors. And so this like spells out all of the objectives and how to create a domain for those particular majors. Because even though it's a requirement for the major, it's not like they have a class within the major that specifically focuses on that. I think they do have different classes that have domains as part of the project work, but not like one class that's particularly required for all majors. So some students might get it, other students may not. So how do you support that? And that's where I do want to just give a little bit of a shout out to our Tech Bar. These are Tech Bar trainings that we're giving today, but you know, the Tech Bar is just downstairs from us, and that's a student kind of technology tutoring center that we have. So we think about this in the same way that people think about the writing center. So if you know, you want to get better at writing, even if you're a good writer, I would recommend that you go to the writing center, because that's how you get better, is you have other people kind of look at your writing, give you feedback, and then you make some changes, and then, you know, you kind of go through this process. The same thing with technology, right? You just use it a little bit more, you have some questions, well, how would I do this? How do I get around this? So people make appointments with the Tech Bar consultants, and they come, they sit down with them and work with them. On a whole range of different things. It's not just domains. Domains is just one of the things that they support at the Tech Bar. They also support all the different Google Suite products and a bunch of other things too. But one of the things that they can do is sit down, specifically with WordPress in particular. All of the Tech Bar students have a WordPress site and have played with WordPress themes and plugins and different things. Again, we can't, you know, guarantee that they're an expert in every theme and that they're an expert in every plugin, but that's why we really kind of set the whole center up as a consulting kind of model, more so than a service model, or we're like gonna, you know.
And a lot of it transfers.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it does transfer. So, yeah, the idea is that somebody will come in, you know, with like, you know, do these colors work, or how would I do this? And, you know, really work with the consultants in a way that's collaborative. So, and yep, I already showed you the examples. And yeah, that's the different models that we've seen so far with teaching. I don't know, Taylor, did you want to talk about maybe SPLOTs a little bit? We don't have a ton of time left, but.
Sure. Basically, SPLOTs are this concept of taking a WordPress site or a different type of site and basically making a really simple tool that you can use for one specific purpose in a course or something like that. So a good example of a SPLOT is you can set up a WordPress site to allow students to quickly just write some text and put it right on a page amongst posts that other students have made. but you don't want them, and maybe in this case, you don't want them to need to get an account to sign in and know how WordPress works. You just want to give them a page where they can write words in a box, and it shows up amongst other boxes where students have written words, and that's it. And it's probably not something that will look pretty, and probably not something you'll use permanently, but you just want a bunch of feedback maybe, or like, imagine like micro book reports, and they all showed up right next to each other, and all the students could read them, and you could have them write them all at the same time. Maybe kind of like a Google Doc, but a little visually set up differently. That's a Splot, and that's something that it'd be kind of hard to set up from your own, but there's these tools that people make who are really into WordPress and stuff like this that make that so that's I can install. They call that one Ellen calls True Writer, and it's just a thing that you can just write, and it's very simple. But these sort of one-purpose tools. It's not a site that is like, oh, here's everything but my course and everything I'm going to learn. It's I want to use this as a tool. It's another kind of way of thinking about teaching with a website like this. Whereas you could have, most people, when you're not familiar with that kind of thing, with domain of one's own, they'll go, I need to go look for some product out there that exists that can do this. And maybe you find something. Maybe you don't. You're a teacher, you know, like a lot of times you spend a lot of time looking for something that does what I envision, and maybe you find something that's great. Maybe you find something and it's $800, and you're like, oh, I don't have money for that. So Splots is kind of this idea of marrying people who know about web development and people who are teaching and people who do both of those two things, and making cool little, tiny little tools that do something very specific.
SPLOT?
Yeah, SPLOT. It sort of is an acronym. It's one of those things where it's an acronym that has like a bunch of different meanings. Okay. But the one you hear a lot is smallest possible learning object or tool or something like that. There's like, there's a bunch of them.
And then do I go to Splot and then I can search the tools, or do I go to WordPress and I can search the tools, or how do I find it?
Splots are, it's kind of complicated because it would depend on it's sort of like an idea more than it is like a store or something like that.
Okay.
So they're the guy who's popularized this idea. He's got a website. I'm trying to think if you Google Splots, it might come up, but and he will describe, here's how you can install these things on web server space. I have played around with what I'd like to do is make them available. So if we have a teacher who wanted to use one that they found, I would install it, configure it, and then make it something that could be reusable, so that you wouldn't have to know how to install this stuff. It would basically be like, we had that grid of here's WordPress and Wordle. Splots would have their own section, basically. That's what I
His
like
name
to
is
do.
Alan Levine. You may want to write that down and search
So I
for
can
that.
search for it.
Right, and his handle online is Cogdog. So he's a very prolific
He's one of these.
Sorry, did you say Alan?
Alan. Yeah, he's a very prolific blogger. He blogs like 3 times a day. And like, he does a lot of work of this kind of stuff in education and teaching with this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
Taylor attended a workshop with him a couple of months ago. So, yeah, it's just another way of kind of thinking about this stuff. The possibilities of teaching with this is really wide open. These are just a few examples of some stuff that we've seen with it. Yeah, I think there's a ton of different directions that this could potentially go in. These are just a couple of examples. We've only had a domain instance for 4 months.
4 months.
So
Okay.
it's very, very new.
We have about 120 student, staff, and faculty made sites. So I would say that's about 100 people who have participated, and many of them are, let me see what this is. Okay, I'll get to that later, you know?
Yeah,
I'm not gonna go like, wow, everyone's created something amazing, right? It's only
Right.
been around for a couple months.
Yeah.
But we do have some really cool examples of things that have already happened. I like Adam Brandt's wiki, the South Africa thing. I think that's really cool and has a lot of potential. We even just have a lot of people who are just making little portfolio sites. That's just, this is who I am, this is what I do.
Yeah.
And, you know, they can take those skills with them and when they graduate, they'll be able to keep that site for an amount of time, but not indefinitely. But they know how to do that now, and they can do it again, or they could even export their work if they've done it in WordPress. They can go to Reclaim Hosting or a different hosting company and import that, and they don't have to create everything again. So it's not like they own that content. It doesn't die here on our servers, like a lot of things you do with technology. When I was in college, it's like, okay, I made this here, and unless I copy this right now, I'm never seeing it again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
Yeah.
it's, one of the really cool analogies that's made is that I think Audrey Waters made is that, when you're in school, in elementary school, you get your work sent home. And a lot of parents like to make a folder, and then when they're in high school or after high school, they go, this is work you did.
Right.
But that sometimes, if you don't think that way with digital work, it's
That
gone.
was one of the problems at the high school is the kids had to build a 4-year portfolio for their future.
Mhm.
And then we spent the last 3 months of their senior year reminding them that as soon as you graduate, that all dies.
Yeah.
You better put it on something personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, in some students, no matter how easy it is,
They're not
won't
gonna
do
do
it,
it.
right? It's not important to them right now or whatever.
And
Or
30
they don't
years from
care.
now, they go, oh, I wish I had blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
to
and
show
we
my
can't
kids."
change that. That's the same thing with paperwork too. Like, right, like if they made that portfolio and printed it off and sent it home, it might just go in the trash. Okay. But it's all about giving them all the opportunities to claim that as their own and keep it.
Mhm.
Some still won't take advantage. In fact, most probably still won't. But I think it's important to set it up so that it's really easy, or at least really doable.
And doing it on platforms that are identical to the way that it would look. So we see
Yes.
this with ePortfolio platforms, right, that are
Mhm.
proprietary.
Yep.
Right, so the students build everything in this ePortfolio platform, and then we say, oh, well, you have to download it, but then what do you do with it? Do you just
Literally,
keep some
that happened to
folders?
me
Do you
here.
just keep some, like, how do you organize that? So this might be something that, yes, they can't keep forever, but it's built on something that, they can
move it.
replicate,
Yeah.
right?
Like
That's
when
identical.
I was an education major here, and I made a portfolio in a platform that the teacher education program used to use here. And the idea was when you left, you can export it. Well, what you can do is you can copy and paste out of it. That takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I lost all the structure. I have a
Right.
series of Word documents that really doesn't reflect what I did,
Right.
honestly.
Right.
I mean, it kind of does, but it reflects the words I wrote.
Yeah.
When I left the Green Bay School District, oh, you're welcome to take your files with you. Really? I've been teaching for 25 years. And you would like me to,
Right.
copy and paste them over one
Yeah.
by one.
Yeah.
Oh, you can go through this program and export it. No, you can only do it in batches of 5. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
It's a
Yeah.
hard thing. And obviously, and I also, as a person who works in IT, I also sympathize with their viewpoint of it. It's like,
Absolutely.
what are they supposed to do, right? But I think you have to talk about this stuff ahead of time.
So that-
And
yeah.
it's
Doesn't get
a
you
conversation that needs to happen early. Like something we talk about very often. Like we use a lot of Google tools here at St. Norbert, and so your documents that students make on their St. Norbert account, they might not have their St. Norbert account forever. Right now, alumni can't keep their accounts. But I'm a good example. I was a student here, but I work here now. When I leave, I don't get an alumni account. It's just done, right?
Mhm.
Like my account's done because I was an employee.
Mm.
So when we talk about, there is a way to transfer this. Google has a tool that lets you actually download with one button everything you've made. That's good, but people need to know about it.
Right.
You know?
And have you ever done it? 'Cause
Yes, I actually have.
Yeah, I did it.
I did it because I was a teacher, so I took my stuff I used to teach in Crivets. I took my stuff from
Yeah.
there. I actually taken my stuff out of my St. Norbert account when I graduated, but then now I'm back, so it's still there. So you need to, but if you don't know about it, it's no good.
Right.
And a few years ago, that tool wasn't as good as it is now.
Yes, I can attest to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is Green Bay Schools went from Microsoft to Google. So the first 10 years, everything I had was in
Sure.
Word, and
Mm.
then that was also a joy.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's there's a cost of switching to that isn't just money.
yeah. So yeah, that's why I'm excited to do this, because I'm like, oh, this is
Yeah,
easier.
yeah.
In some ways, yeah, it can be complicated too, but
Sure.
it doesn't have to.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for doing
And if
this.
you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm really excited that you're gonna be doing Ditchkins, yeah,
This is something that
great.
you'll know about already.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you want to shut off your camera.
yes, I'm gonna do that right now. Stop recording.